People who have done psychedelics, what's the weirdest thing you've seen while tripping? Disclaimer, this content was not made with the intent to glamorize the use of drugs. LSD, New Year's Eve 1992. Someone knocked over a mostly empty glass of water. I saw all these little DNA strand looking things cover the floor. I was concerned that they spilled the new year. I saw love. I was laying down in bed on around 4 grams of mushrooms, and among different things I felt really warm and safe. When I closed my eyes I saw a diamond-shaped object that radiated colors I have never seen before, but if I had to describe them, I would say it was bright and gleeful purple and pink. Edges were well defined and the whole thing was beautiful. For a moment, around a minute, I felt nothing but being loved, safe and really warm. My body was blushing and floating. I did not hear any voices, I did not feel like there was any message or wise thoughts in the ether. It was pure bliss and love. I did mushrooms many times, but this encounter I've always considered as a novelty, even after so many trips. I've taken LSD 3 times and never saw anything terribly scary or upsetting. First time I saw it though, I didn't know what my dog was. She's a fancy breed, called a borzoi, and I knew she was an animal but I wasn't sure what kind. I kept asking my girlfriend to show me a real dog because I was imagining golden retrievers, etc. as real dogs. Salvia wasn't intense for me, but for the 15 seconds it worked. I briefly thought a stuffed animal of mine was taking me to the circus. Your dog makes me feel like I'm tripping. Well, this might not seem too crazy from the outside, but here goes. I was sitting tripping out looking at things move, and my friend opens a door from a part of the room I can't see and randomly throws some candy at me. And I catch it. I didn't know he opened the door, I didn't know he threw anything, and I didn't know I caught it. I only realized I had done the impossible when I looked down at my hand, then looked around. He was yelling, "Wait F, that was crazy." Some would say reflexes, or that it was just the drugs that made it crazy, but I felt as if I had gone in the future, saw him throw it, and then went back and caught it before I could have known it was thrown. Somewhat similar, I was once jamming with a friend on a mushroom come up and started playing these improvised piano runs that were both technically and harmonically way beyond my skills as a pianist. Just these incredible crazy improvs using all sorts of harmonic substitution that was next level. It was as if I became Stevie Wonder for about 20 seconds. After those 20 seconds my friend and I both stopped and had one of those shared psychedelic laughs that occur when you both witness or experience something together. But for a moment there, much like it sounds you did, I tapped into an unexplained part of the mind. I did shrooms once in college and started playing guitar. I'm like a fair guitarist but not great. About half an hour after I started I had people in my room literally clapping. The head of the student union was asking if he could book me to open for a band. I was like, nah man, I can't play guitar. Was crazy. I was living with the half-crazy younger brother of one of my friends. He had self-control problems and would regularly sit in his room smoking weed for days on end. One night a friend of mine comes over with 8 tabs of acid and my crazy roommate begs for some. He's never tried it before. Other than weed, the only drug he'd ever taken was an ecstasy pill about a year earlier that had made him paranoid and convinced him that there was a conspiracy to turn him into a drug addict. I debated whether or not I should give him a tab, eventually deciding that it was better for him to do it with us where we could take care of him, rather than with other people, or alone. The drugs hadn't even kicked in before he started asking for more. We tried to explain that it could take hours to feel the full effects, but he wouldn't stop asking for more. The way I saw it, I had 2 options: give him another to shut him up and stop him wrecking my buzz, or immediately eat the 5 tabs I'd left so there would be none to give him. I chose option 2. Several hours later we're wandering the countryside, enjoying nature and shouting into a valley to hear our voices echo back to us. No matter how loud my friend shouted, his voice just wouldn't echo, and for some reason I thought that was so hilarious I had to run away before the acid turned him into a duck. I'd heard that ducks' quacks don't echo. I ran through the fields in the pitch black and eventually found myself lying on my back staring up at the stars. They looked amazing there in the countryside with little light pollution. As I gazed up in wonder, the stars twisted and turned, forming into the shape of a hand that reached down, grabbed me and pulled me to the center of the universe. I flew at incredible speed past stars, ringed planets, and nebula before coming to a stop in front of a floating alien creature made of pure white light. He said he had brought me here to tell me the funniest joke in the universe, and when my friends eventually found me I had tears streaming down my face from laughing so hard. I wish I could tell you the joke, but sadly it was in an alien language that I don't understand. It's now 15 years later and I still occasionally think of that joke and giggle. Oh boy. This post was made for me, lol. DMT and mushrooms. I had an experience in which I woke up in a different body in a different world but couldn't distinguish it from waking reality, so I just walked about living day-to-day life with people I didn't know as if it was totally normal for what felt like months. Of course, as DMT goes, I came back out of the trip 10-ish minutes later, but the messed up part is since it felt so real for so long, I legitimately miss people that don't exist. Well, I'll preface that this was my first trip. My buddy had come up with some acid. I was alone in my room on a Friday night and I decided it was as good a time as any to test it. So I eat my blotter and kick back to see what all the fuss was about. About 45 minutes in. Nothing. I figured I had been ripped off, so in an effort to entertain myself I start channel scanning to find something else to occupy my evening. As luck would have it, Natural Born Killers was on, so I settled in and started watching. 15 or so minutes after that we came to the animated bit, and I start noticing everything is really vibrant. Like blood splashing out of the screen and covering my wall vibrant. While I was distracted, it seemed the good doctor had stepped in and started climbing me up my first peak ever. I looked down and I saw long thin neon-colored worms crawling in and out of the flesh of my arms, brilliant greens and pinks and blues weaving through me. I had enough rationality to know it wasn't real, but still freaky as hell. I knew my older sister was in her room down the hall, and she had to have been in a similar state, so I went to check in with her. We had a bathroom that pretty much linked our two rooms, and since I wasn't too keen on running into my parents in this state, I figured I'd detour through the bathroom. Big mistake. As I entered the bathroom, I immediately found the massive mirror behind the sink, and took a long look in the mirror. Anybody who's ever tripped knows this is not a brilliant plan. When you're already hallucinating, staring at your reflection can be intensely disconcerting. For example, looking at your 15-year-old self and watching your reflection as it morphs into that of a zombie werewolf. Flesh falling off in clumps, hair growing at an incredible rate, eyes glowing, teeth lengthening. Really bad. I think I was transfixed in front of that godforsaken mirror for between 30 seconds and 5 years. The previously mentioned worms were really getting into their work now, and it seemed like they may have been the only things holding me together. Eventually I managed to break my gaze and tear ass out of there and into my sister's room. I tried explaining my plight, but she told me to fuck off as she was tripping too and tied up on the phone with her boyfriend at the time. I managed to leave her room, but opted for the hallway instead of the horror show of the bathroom. Somehow I made it down the hall and back to my room, but shit was not getting any better in there. Instead, the movie was still playing, and at some point in time I had apparently hit play on the CD player, so now I was dealing with Nin the downward spiral to boot. My carpet was alive like a million crawling irate insects, and the only safe bastion was my bed a million miles across the room. Using all of the Mario skills I had been taught, I managed to skip across patches of laundry and land safely on the bed, which seemed to have aggravated my carpet further. A singular fiber had climbed my dresser and began an almost Hitler-esque speech from its top, which incited its Berber kin to a full-blown mosh pit. The carpet writhed and crested and grew to a giant angry mound with a gaping maw, and no sooner did it reach its full height than it turned hungrily on me. As my carpet beast began charging my position mouth agape, I did the only thing one could do in such a predicament. With a barbaric yelp I hurled my pillow right into the mouth of the beast, causing it to choke, gasp, and eventually die. On LSD last year, I was with my best friend and her boyfriend. We had the lights out and were listening to music with the iTunes visualizer on, like we were 15 or some shit. At one point, my friend gets up to turn on the light. Right before she turned it on, she gasps and goes, "We forgot." What she meant was that we forgot how intense everything looked with the lights on. Here's what I thought she meant. She had taken a shower about an hour before, so I immediately, for some ridiculous reason, I assumed she meant she forgot to turn off the water and had flooded the apartment. I have no idea why. But when she turned on the light, I looked down, and the floor was covered in water. I jumped up and looked all over the floor like, oh my god. Worrying that it was going to flood into the floor below us. But I was an idiot, because there was nothing there. It was just me hallucinating as a result of our shiny hardwood floors. I told them about it the next day and they were dying. For myself was watching a girl I was doing it with transforming from her normal self into a clown. It was terrifying. I have no problems with clowns. We were standing in her living room having ice lollies and she looked up at me and as she grinned, her face grew paint and her hair turned into a Joker's hat. LSD makes you see connections you don't want to see sober. Turned out she was a backer stabbed who wore a mask when I was around. Watching a good friend do LSD sober was profound. He fell in love with a wall. He tripped over a rug and was thankfully saved by the wall. The appreciation was beautiful. He hugged it for 20 minutes, telling it how much he loved it. He even cried. I have not seen love like that since. If you have any interesting trips you'd like to share, drop them in the comments.